This is Stephen French from alevelsspanish.co.uk with some top translation tips for A-level students. So let's get going. What I've done is I have created a sentence in English based on the sort of level of difficulty which is clear from the AQA Spanish textbook, and what I will now do is to go through and show you perhaps one or two of the pitfalls that you might encounter when you're actually trying to translate this into Spanish. So really the purpose of this is to help students with translation from English to Spanish, and perhaps just show one or two techniques that can perhaps be used. So let's get going. So firstly, we've got Las Fiestas de San Fermín. What I've got is, in the table, I've broken up the sentence into 4 separate chunks, and in each of the chunks I've got one or two things or points that I'd like to make whilst going through, and sort of the thought process that you need to have when you're actually doing a translation. So let's get going. So first of all, Las Fiestas de San Fermín shouldn't really cause any difficulties because of course it's in Spanish, but the point that I will make is we've got to remember that the subject of the sentence is in the plural, and this will have a knock-on effect to the second part of the translation, the second chunk, if you like, of our sentence. So what we're trying to do now is to put plays into Spanish which take place in Pamplona. Now the first thing to note is the word which is que. Doesn't have an accent, because of course QUE with an accent means what. But in this particular case, what we want is which, so it's the word que. Quite simple. What I do suggest is that you do make sure that you know all of these small little words that crop up so much. I know that it does cause students quite a lot of difficulty, so I do suggest that start making a little list, if you haven't got them, of those little words. Now, the second bit is tener lugar. Now, if you look up in the dictionary, tener lugar means to take place. Firstly then, we've got tener. Now, almost certainly, all of the students listening to this will know that tener is an irregular verb in the present tense and indeed in other tenses. So here, just to run through, in the present tense it would go tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, tienen, and it's the last one that we want. It's the verb in the plural, it's the third person plural, and that gives us tienen. So the expression to take place is tener lugar. So putting that all together and wrapping it all up, we've got que tienen lugar. Okay, let's move on now to the third chunk or part of the sentence. Now what we're going to translate is a famous festival. The first is es, of course, is the word is. I'm not going to go in here into the differences between ser and estar, but this one is a permanent feature of the festival. It's not an not a passing or fleeting characteristic. It's a permanent characteristic, and that's why we're using es. And of course, this is from the verb ser, irregular, soy, eres, es, and there it is. And the rest of the present tense would be somos, sois, son. So the first word is. Now, next thing to note, that we've got the word festival, un festival. It's un festival, it's masculine. So we've got to make sure that the adjective is used correctly, and so we've got it there. So it's festival. The word famoso is in the masculine, it's not in the feminine, and in this particular case the adjective follows the noun. Now this is not always the case in Spanish. Sometimes the adjective can go in front of the noun, but in this particular case it goes after the noun, and perhaps in other top translation tips videos we'll talk about those adjectives that can go before or after. But in this particular case then, to make it clear, it goes after. So there we've got, after that little run through, es un festival famoso. And then finally, not too bad hopefully, the translation in Spain is en España. A couple of perhaps simple points. Notice that España has got a capital letter. Conversely, of course, the word Spanish, although it's got a capital letter in English, does not have a capital letter in Spanish. The second point, coming down my list there, is that España has got an accent on it. The tilde is on the end, producing that ñ sound. So España, and hopefully, perhaps this is not the case, but I do know that sometimes there is a confusion with students between the word Spain and Spanish. So the verb Spanish in Spanish is español, with the lower case, as I mentioned earlier on. And the word Spain is España. So make sure you don't make that confusion when you're doing your translations, although I have seen it. So just before we wrap up, that actually gives us the complete sentence. Las fiestas de San Fermín que tienen lugar en Pamplona es un festival famoso en España. Okay, hopefully you found that useful. So that's Stephen French from alevelsspanish.co.uk or at A-Level Spanish on Twitter, signing out now, and I look forward to not seeing you, but perhaps you'd like to come back, because there'll be a whole series of these going up on the net. Bueno, adiós y hasta pronto. And I hope you found that useful. Adiós.